Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session on human resource management. I'm excited to have you all here as we dive into this important topic. This presentation is specifically tailored for UGC NET preparation, focusing on key concepts and strategies. Over the next few slides, we'll cover the fundamentals of IHRM, its significance, and some tips to help you succeed in your exam. Let's get started and make this session both informative and engaging. Welcome to Unit III, where we delve into human resource development. In this section, we'll explore how developing our human resources is essential for organizational growth and success. Human resource development, or HRD, is all about improving the skills, knowledge, and attitudes of our employees to better meet the company's goals. It's not just about training. It's a comprehensive approach that includes learning, career development, and organizational development. As we progress through the presentation, you'll see how HRD connects with overall organizational effectiveness, fostering a motivated and skilled workforce. So, let's keep in mind that investing in our people is investing in the future of our organization. Let's take a closer look at some fundamental concepts in human resource development. First, the idea of HRD concepts was introduced by Leonard Nadler back in 1969. He proposed a comprehensive system that includes 4 key components: training, education, development, and extension. These elements work together to build and enhance human capabilities within organizations. Next, we have HRD mechanisms, which are the tools used to implement these concepts. These include performance appraisal, which helps assess employee performance, potential appraisal to identify future leaders, feedback and counseling for ongoing support and improvement, career planning to guide employee growth, and reward systems to motivate and recognize achievements. Moving on, the culture of HRD is often described by the OCTAPACE model. This stands for openness, confrontation, trust, autonomy, proactivity, authenticity, collaboration, and experimentation. Cultivating these values creates an environment where learning and development can thrive. Now, let's discuss the action research model. It's a cyclical process designed for continuous improvement. It starts with identifying a problem, then consulting with experts, gathering relevant data, providing feedback, jointly diagnosing issues, taking action, and finally gathering data again to assess the results. This cycle helps organizations adapt and evolve effectively. Lastly, HR accounting involves valuing human resources as vital assets. There are different models for this, such as Lev and Schwartz, which focus on economic value, and Flamholtz, which considers replacement costs. Recognizing human resources as assets emphasizes their importance in organizational success and strategic planning. All of these concepts and tools are interconnected, helping organizations develop their human capital in a structured and strategic way. Let's take a closer look at HRD interventions, which are targeted activities aimed at boosting organizational health. These interventions are essential because they help develop individuals, teams, and the organization as a whole. Starting with individual-level interventions, we have activities like job enrichment, coaching, and mentoring. These are all about empowering employees, making their work more meaningful, and supporting their personal growth. Moving to the team level, we focus on team building, quality circles, and T groups, also known as sensitivity training. These activities are designed to improve teamwork, communication, and collaboration, which are vital for a healthy work environment. Finally, at the organizational level, we implement interventions like survey feedback, management by objectives, and total quality management. These strategies help shape the overall culture, foster continuous improvement, and align organizational goals with employee efforts. By integrating these various interventions, we aim to create a resilient, motivated, and high-performing organization. They are interconnected and support our broader goal of enhancing organizational effectiveness and employee engagement. Let's dive into the role of technology and knowledge in HR. First, we have the HRIS, or Human Resources Information System. Think of it as a specialized database that helps us acquire, store, and analyze all kinds of HR-related information. Examples include SAP HR and Oracle, which are powerful tools for managing employee data efficiently. Next, we have knowledge management, or KM. This is all about capturing, sharing, and effectively using knowledge within the organization. It ensures that valuable insights and information are accessible and useful for decision-making. Within KM, there's a distinction between explicit and tacit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is the kind that's documented, like manuals, reports, or procedures. It's easy to write down and share. Tacit knowledge, on the other hand, is more about know-how, the skills and insights stored in the minds of employees. This type of knowledge is harder to transfer because it's often based on experience and intuition. Understanding these concepts helps us see how technology supports HR functions and how managing knowledge effectively can lead to better organizational performance. It's all about leveraging tools and insights to create a smarter, more agile HR environment. Let's take a closer look at International HRM, or IHRM, which focuses on the complexities involved in managing people across different countries and cultures. As companies expand globally, understanding these challenges becomes crucial. Now, a helpful framework to understand how organizations approach their international operations is the EPRG framework, developed by Perlmutter. This model describes the mindset or philosophy a company adopts when managing across borders. First, we have the ethnocentric approach, which is home country oriented. In this model, key positions in the international operations are typically filled by nationals from the parent country, known as PCNs. This approach often reflects a belief that the home country's practices are the best. Next is the polycentric approach, which is host country oriented. Here, subsidiaries are managed by locals, called HCNs, who understand the local culture and market. This approach allows for greater adaptation to local needs, but can sometimes lead to a lack of cohesion across the company. Then we have the regiocentric approach, which takes a regional perspective. Staff tend to move within a specific geographic region, such as the European Union or ASEAN countries. This regional focus helps balance local adaptation with some degree of integration. Finally, the geocentric approach is globally oriented. The idea here is to select the best person for a job, regardless of nationality. This approach promotes a truly international outlook and often supports the overall global strategy of the company. Understanding these different orientations helps us see how companies align their HR strategies with their overall international objectives. It's all about finding the right balance between local responsiveness and global integration. Let's take a closer look at some key IHRM concepts and models. First, we have cross-cultural studies, which include Hofstede's dimensions. These are essential because they help us understand how different cultures perceive things like power distance, how much inequality is accepted, and whether a society leans more towards individualism or collectivism. We also consider masculinity versus femininity, which relates to gender roles, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation. These dimensions give us a framework to navigate cultural differences effectively. Moving on, we have the types of employees. Here, we categorize employees into PCNs, or parent country nationals, those sent from the headquarters, HCNs, or host country nationals, local employees in the host country, and TCNs, or third country nationals, those from a third country different from both the parent and host. Understanding these distinctions is crucial for managing talent across borders. Next, there's the concept of a transnational organization. These organizations aim to balance global efficiency with local responsiveness. The idea is to think global, act local, leveraging worldwide resources while adapting to local market needs. It's a strategic approach to international HR management. Finally, we have Morgan's model, which frames IHRM as the interaction of three key dimensions: HR activities, the countries where operations occur, and the types of employees involved. This model helps us see the bigger picture, how different factors come together to shape effective international HR strategies. All of these concepts are interconnected and vital for developing a comprehensive understanding of how to manage human resources effectively across borders. Today, we're moving on to Unit IV, which focuses on organizational behavior, or OB for short. This is a crucial area because it helps us understand how individuals and groups act within organizations. By studying OB, we can improve workplace effectiveness, foster better communication, and enhance overall employee satisfaction. Throughout this unit, we'll explore key concepts like motivation, leadership, team dynamics, and organizational culture. These elements are interconnected and play a vital role in creating a productive and positive work environment. As we go through this section, keep in mind how these ideas relate to real-world organizational success and your own experiences in the workplace. This understanding will be essential in helping you manage and lead more effectively in any professional setting. Let's take a closer look at some of the key personality theories. First, we have trait theory, which was developed by Allport and Cattell. This theory focuses on identifying stable characteristics that define our personalities. Cattell, in particular, pinpointed 16 primary personality factors, often called the 16 PF, that help describe individual differences. Next is the Big Five, also known as OCEAN, a widely accepted model in psychology. It breaks personality down into 5 broad dimensions: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. These traits provide a useful framework for understanding how people typically think, feel, and behave. Moving on, we have the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI, which categorizes personalities into 16 different types. These types are based on 4 dichotomous scales: E or I for extroversion or introversion, S or N for sensing or intuition, T or F for thinking or feeling, and J or P for judging or perceiving. It's a popular tool for understanding individual preferences. Then there's the Type A and Type B theory by Friedman and Rosenman. Type A personalities tend to be competitive, urgent, and often stressed, while Type B personalities are more relaxed and patient. Recognizing these types can help explain different responses to stress and work environments. Lastly, we have Holland's Code, also called RIASEC, which categorizes people based on their interests into 6 areas: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. This model is especially useful in career counseling and understanding occupational preferences. Connecting these theories to our overall theme, they all offer valuable insights into what makes us unique and how we can better understand ourselves and others in various contexts. Let's explore the different motivation theories that help us understand what drives human behavior. Motivation is often split into 2 main categories: content and process. Content theories focus on what motivates us, those underlying needs and desires, while process theories examine how motivation actually occurs or the psychological processes behind it. Starting with content theories, one of the most well-known is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This model suggests that human needs are arranged in 5 levels, beginning with physiological needs like food and shelter, then safety needs, social needs such as belonging, esteem needs for respect and recognition, and finally self-actualization, which is reaching our full potential. Next, Herzberg's 2-factor theory differentiates between hygiene factors and motivators. Hygiene factors, like salary and work conditions, prevent dissatisfaction but don't necessarily motivate us. Motivators, on the other hand, such as achievement and recognition, actively create satisfaction and drive engagement. Then we have McClelland's needs theory, which focuses on 3 primary needs: achievement, the desire to excel; power, the wish to influence others; and affiliation, the need for friendly relationships. Recognizing these helps us understand what motivates different individuals in the workplace. Alderfer's erg theory simplifies Maslow's hierarchy into 3 core categories: existence, relatedness, and growth. This model suggests that these needs can be pursued simultaneously, and that frustration in higher-level needs can lead us to focus more on lower-level needs. Moving to process theories, Vroom's expectancy theory explains motivation through three components. Expectancy, the belief that effort will lead to performance. Instrumentality, the belief that performance will lead to outcomes. And valence, the value placed on those outcomes. When these factors align positively, motivation increases. Finally, Adams' equity theory emphasizes fairness. It states that our motivation depends on how fairly we perceive our input-to-output ratio compared to others. If we feel under-rewarded or over-rewarded, it can affect our motivation and attitude toward work. All these theories together give us a comprehensive view of motivation, from what sparks our needs to how we process and perceive fairness. Understanding these helps us create better strategies to motivate ourselves and others effectively. Let's take a closer look at some key leadership theories. First up, we have the behavioral school, which emphasizes how leaders behave and interact with their teams. One important model here is the managerial grid by Blake and Mouton. It maps leadership styles based on concern for people and production, with examples like impoverished management at 11, which is minimal effort, and team management at 99, which aims for high concern for both people and results. There's also the country club style at 19, prioritizing a comfortable environment, and task management at 91, focusing heavily on tasks. Next, still within behavioral theories, is Likhart's 4 systems. This model describes different management approaches. System 1 is exploitative and authoritative. System 2 is benevolent but autocratic. System 3 introduces some consultation. And System 4 is participative, where leaders involve their teams in decision-making. These systems help us understand how leadership styles evolve from controlling to collaborative. Moving on to the contingency school, we see that leadership effectiveness depends on the situation. Fiedler's contingency model uses the LPC, or Least Preferred Coworker Scale, to assess whether a leader is task-oriented or relationship-oriented. The success of a leader hinges on how well their style fits the specific situation, which varies in terms of task structure and team dynamics. Then there's the path goal theory by Robert House. It suggests that effective leaders clear obstacles and provide support, making it easier for followers to reach their goals. Basically, a good leader adapts their style to help their team succeed, depending on the context. Finally, we have the modern school, with transformational leadership. These leaders inspire followers to go beyond their self-interest and work towards a shared vision for the organization. It's about motivating people at a deeper level, fostering commitment, and driving change. Together, these theories give us a comprehensive view of leadership, showing that different situations call for different approaches, and effective leaders adapt accordingly. Let's talk about perception and learning, which are fundamental building blocks of individual behavior. Perception is essentially the process of interpreting the sensory information we receive from our environment. It's how we make sense of the world around us. But perception isn't always accurate. It can be influenced by several biases. For example, stereotyping involves making generalizations about people or groups. The halo effect is when a single trait, like attractiveness or competence, influences our overall perception of someone. And selective perception means we tend to notice only what confirms our existing beliefs or expectations. Moving on to attribution theory, this helps us understand how we interpret others' behaviors. Developed by Fritz Heider and Harold Kelly, it involves determining whether someone's actions are due to internal factors, like their personality, or external factors, like the situation. We assess this based on 3 key criteria: consensus, which looks at how others behave in similar situations; consistency, which considers whether the behavior occurs repeatedly; and distinctiveness, whether the behavior is specific to a particular situation. Now let's explore learning, which shapes much of our behavior. First, classical conditioning, pioneered by Ivan Pavlov, involves learning through association. Think of Pavlov's dogs. They learn to associate the sound of a bell with food, eventually salivating at the sound alone. Next is operant conditioning, developed by B.F. Skinner. Here, behavior is influenced by its consequences. Positive reinforcement adds a pleasant stimulus to encourage a behavior. Negative reinforcement removes an unpleasant one. Punishment aims to reduce undesirable behavior, and extinction involves withholding reinforcement to diminish a behavior. Finally, social learning, described by Albert Bandura, emphasizes learning by observing others. This involves paying attention to model behaviors, retaining that information, reproducing the behavior, and receiving reinforcement or feedback. It's a powerful way we learn from our environment and the people around us. All these concepts are interconnected and help us understand how individuals perceive, interpret, and learn from their experiences, which is central to understanding human behavior in any setting. Let's dive into the fascinating world of group dynamics and interpersonal behavior. This area is essential because it helps us understand how teams really function within an organization. First, we'll look at the stages of group development, which are outlined in Tuckman's model. It begins with the forming stage, where team members are just getting to know each other, orienting themselves, and there's often a lot of uncertainty. Next is the storming phase, where conflicts may arise over leadership and roles. They're trying to figure out who does what. Then comes the norming stage, where cohesion starts to build, and the rules of the game are established to guide how the team works together. After that is performing, where the team is fully functional, focusing on achieving their tasks effectively. And finally, adjourning, which involves completing the task at hand and dispersing, often marking the end of the team's cycle. Now, connecting this to interpersonal relationships, the Johari window is an insightful tool developed by Luft and Ingam. It helps us understand self-awareness and how we relate to others. The open area is what we and others know about ourselves, things we're aware of and comfortable sharing. The blind spot, on the other hand, is what others see in us that we might not realize ourselves. The hidden area, or facade, contains things we know about ourselves but choose not to reveal. Lastly, the unknown area is what neither we nor others are aware of, potentially hidden talents or unconscious traits. By understanding these concepts, we can improve communication, build stronger relationships, and foster better teamwork, all critical to organizational success. Let's dive into the relationship between communication, power, and stress. First, we'll look at communication. The Shannon-Weaver model emphasizes that effective communication depends on minimizing noise and ensuring feedback. Noise can be semantic, psychological, physical, or organizational, and these barriers can distort or block the message. Recognizing and managing these barriers is crucial for clear communication. Next, we have power bases, as described by French and Raven. There are 5 main types: reward power, which is based on the ability to give rewards; coercive power, which relies on the ability to punish; legitimate or authority power, stemming from a formal position; referent power, which comes from charisma or personal appeal; and expert power, based on knowledge or skills. Understanding these helps us see how influence operates in organizations. Moving on to authority, Max Weber identified 3 types: traditional authority, which is based on long-standing customs; charismatic authority, rooted in personal charm and appeal; and legal rational authority, grounded in established laws and rules. Recognizing these types helps explain different leadership styles and organizational dynamics. Finally, let's touch on stress. Hans Selye's general adaptation syndrome outlines 3 stages: alarm, where the body detects a threat; resistance, where it tries to cope; and exhaustion if the stress persists, leading to fatigue or health issues. Being aware of these stages helps us understand how stress impacts us and what we can do to manage it effectively. Connecting all these concepts, it's clear that effective communication, understanding power dynamics, and managing stress are all interconnected elements that influence our success and well-being in organizational settings. Now, let's explore organizational change and development, or OD for short. A key framework here is Lewin's change model, which provides a simple yet powerful way to understand how change happens. First, we have the unfreezing stage. This is all about preparing the organization to accept that change is necessary. Think of it as breaking the status quo, opening people's minds to the idea that things need to shift. Next is the changing or moving phase, where we actually implement the change. It involves introducing new behaviors, processes, or structures, basically, making the shift happen in practice. Finally, refreezing ensures that these new ways become permanent. It's about standardizing the change so it's integrated into the organization's culture and routines. Beyond Lewin's model, there are specific odd techniques. For example, sensitivity training or T groups focus on improving interpersonal sensitivity among team members, helping them understand each other better. Then we have Grid OD, which is based on the Blake-Mouton managerial grid. It helps leaders identify their management style and adjust it for better organizational outcomes. Survey feedback is another useful tool, collecting data from employees to identify issues and plan targeted actions. This promotes engagement and ensures the change process is informed by real insights. Lastly, process consultation involves an outside expert helping managers perceive, understand, and act on process events within the organization. It's about guiding change from the outside in a way that complements internal efforts. All of these methods tie back to the overall theme of fostering effective change and development within organizations, ensuring they adapt and thrive in a dynamic environment. Now, let's move on to Unit V, which focuses on industrial relations, or IR. This is a crucial part of understanding how organizations and workers interact. In this section, we'll explore the key concepts that define IR, including how relationships are managed, the importance of effective communication, and the role of negotiations and agreements. We'll also look at how IR contributes to overall organizational stability and growth. Remember, the goal here is to see IR not just as a set of rules, but as a vital framework that helps create a productive and harmonious work environment. As we go through this unit, keep in mind how these principles tie into the broader themes of organizational success and employee engagement. Let's take a closer look at the approaches and models in industrial relations. IR, as you know, is essentially the study of the relationships between management, labor, and government. Now, there are several different approaches to understanding these relationships, each with its own perspective and core ideas. Starting with the unitary approach, this view sees the organization as one big happy family. It believes that conflict is unnecessary or is caused by outsiders trying to disrupt harmony. So, in this model, the focus is on unity and shared goals within the organization. Next, we have the pluralist approach, which is more realistic about conflict. Prominent proponents like Ross and Hartman argue that conflict is natural and inevitable because different groups have different interests. Trade unions, in this context, are seen as essential to balance power and protect workers' rights. Moving on, the Marxist approach offers a more critical perspective. Based on Karl Marx's ideas, it views IR as a reflection of underlying class struggles. According to this model, conflict only ends when capitalism itself ends, highlighting the deep-rooted economic inequalities. Then there is the systems approach, developed by John Dunlop. It sees IR as a web of relationships involving three main actors: labor, management, and government, and three key contexts: technology, market forces, and power dynamics. All of this is underpinned by underlying ideologies that influence the rules and practices. The Oxford approach, associated with Flanders, emphasizes collective bargaining as the primary method of making rules and resolving disputes. It highlights the importance of negotiation and agreement between parties. Finally, the Geary approach, championed by V.V. Geary, stresses voluntary arbitration and mutual settlement over litigation. It promotes resolving conflicts through voluntary discussions and agreements, encouraging cooperation and consensus. Understanding these different models helps us see the complexity and diversity of perspectives in industrial relations. Each approach offers valuable insights and tools for managing workplace relationships effectively, which ties into our overall theme of fostering better management-labor-government relations. Let's talk about bipartitism and tripartitism, which are two important concepts related to how decisions are made in labor relations. Bipartitism involves direct negotiation between the employer and the employee. This typically happens in settings like the Code of Discipline or Works Committees, where both parties come together to resolve issues without involving any third party. On the other hand, tripartitism includes a third key player, the government. The idea here is to ensure social justice and fairness for all parties involved. By including the government, we aim to create a more balanced and equitable decision-making process. In India, the highest tripartite body is the Indian Labour Conference, often called the Labour Parliament. It's a platform where representatives from the government, employers, and workers come together to discuss and negotiate labor issues on a national level. Supporting this body is the Standing Labour Committee, or SLC, which assists the Indian Labour Conference in its functions, helping streamline discussions and recommendations. On a global scale, we have the International Labour Organization, or ILO. The ILO sets international standards for tripartitism, promoting cooperation between governments, employers, and workers worldwide to improve labor conditions everywhere. So, in summary, bipartitism and tripartitism reflect different approaches to decision-making, either involving two parties directly or including a third to promote fairness and social justice. These concepts are essential to understanding how labor relations are managed both in India and globally. Now let's look at the key aspects of grievance, discipline, and the code of conduct. Starting with grievance handling, it follows what we call the model grievance procedure. This means that when a grievance arises, it typically progresses through several steps. First, the supervisor listens and tries to resolve the issue. If needed, it moves up to the head of department, then to the grievance committee, next to management, and finally, if all else fails, to voluntary arbitration. The idea here is to ensure a fair and transparent process for resolving disputes. Moving on to disciplinary action, it's grounded in the principles of natural justice. These principles emphasize two main points. First, the person involved must be given a chance to hear and respond to the case against them, what we call audit alteram partem. Second, no one should act as a judge in their own cause. That is, impartiality is crucial. These principles help maintain fairness and integrity in disciplinary procedures. Next, let's talk about the hot stove rule, a concept introduced by Douglas McGregor. According to this rule, discipline should be immediate so that the connection between action and consequence is clear, consistent to avoid unfair treatment, impersonal meaning it should be based on facts, not emotions, and with forewarning so employees know what to expect. This approach promotes discipline that is fair and effective. Finally, the Code of Discipline was adopted back in 1958 at the 16th Industrial Labor Conference. It's a voluntary set of guidelines, kind of a code of do's and don'ts, that management and unions agree upon. It helps create a shared understanding of acceptable behavior and procedures, fostering a harmonious working environment. Bringing it all together, these procedures and principles are vital for maintaining discipline and fairness in the workplace, supporting the overall theme of promoting a respectful and productive organizational culture. Let's take a closer look at collective bargaining. Defined by Webb's, it's essentially a method where trade unions negotiate directly with employers to reach agreements. Now, there are different types of bargaining, as outlined by Walton and McCursey, each with its own focus and approach. First, there's distributive bargaining, which is often a win-lose situation. Think of it as a zero-sum game, where one side's gain, like a wage hike, comes at the expense of the other. It's about dividing limited resources. Next, we have integrative bargaining, which aims for a win-win outcome. Here, both parties cooperate to solve problems together, such as implementing productivity bonuses that benefit everyone. Then, there's attitudinal restructuring. This type focuses on changing the relationship itself, building trust and positive attitudes between the parties, which can lead to smoother negotiations in the future. Finally, intra-organizational bargaining happens within a single organization. For example, a union leader may negotiate internally with union members about strategies or demands. Connecting this to the overall theme, understanding these different types helps us see how negotiations can vary based on the goals and relationships involved. It's about choosing the right approach to achieve effective agreements. Now, let's take a closer look at the different levels of workers' participation in management, or WPM for short. These levels really reflect how deeply employees are involved in decision-making processes. At the most basic level, we have the informative stage, where management simply shares information like balance sheets and general updates with workers. It's more about transparency than actual involvement. Moving a step further, there's the consultative level. Here, management does seek input from workers, but ultimately they keep the final decision-making authority. So workers are heard, but the boss has the last say. Next is the associative level, which introduces a moral obligation for management to accept unanimous recommendations from workers. This means if all employees agree on a suggestion, management is ethically bound to consider it seriously. Then we have the administrative level. At this stage, decisions are made jointly. For example, when it comes to welfare funds or other workplace policies, both management and employees collaborate directly. And finally, the highest level of participation is the decisive stage. This is where joint decision-making extends to core business matters, like deciding on plant closures or major strategic shifts. It truly involves workers as partners in critical decisions affecting the company's direction. Throughout this spectrum, we see a progression from simply informing employees to involving them as active partners. Understanding these levels helps us appreciate how different organizations foster employee engagement and shared responsibility, which ultimately contributes to a more inclusive and motivated work environment. Now, just as workers have their unions to represent their interests, employers also have organizations that serve a similar purpose at both the national and international levels. These organizations are essential for advocating on behalf of employers and ensuring their voice is heard in policy discussions. For example, in India, one of the major employers' organizations is the Confederation of Indian Industry, or CII. It plays a significant role in shaping industrial policies and fostering growth. Another key organization is the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, or FICCI, which is involved in a broad range of business interests across sectors. There's also the All India Organization of Employers, or AIOE, which is linked to FICCI, and it specifically focuses on issues faced by employers across different industries. Similarly, the Employers' Federation of India, EFI, is linked to ASSOCHAM and works to promote employer interests and facilitate dialogue between employers, workers, and the government. Overall, these organizations help create a unified voice for employers, supporting their role in economic development and policy formulation. They are vital in connecting individual businesses to the larger economic and political landscape, which ties back to our overall theme of understanding the different stakeholders in the industrial relations system. Let's take a closer look at trade unionism. A trade union is essentially a continuous association of wage earners, formed with the main purpose of maintaining or even improving the conditions of their working lives. It's about workers coming together to have a stronger voice and better negotiations with employers. Now, there are several theories that help us understand the role and purpose of trade unions from different perspectives. For example, Sidney and Beatrice Webb viewed unions as a way to promote industrial democracy. They believed that unions serve as a means to protect the standard of living for workers, ensuring fair treatment and fair pay. On the other hand, Karl Marx offered a more revolutionary view. He saw unions as schools of communism, emphasizing that they are a battleground in the class conflict, aimed at overthrowing capitalism to establish a classless society. G.D.H. Cole introduced the idea of guild socialism, which focuses on workers' control of industry. For him, trade unions should advocate for workers having a say in how industries are run, promoting collective ownership and management. Frank Tannenbaum brought a psychological and sociological perspective. He suggested that unions help recreate a sense of community that was lost during the Industrial Revolution, fostering social bonds and solidarity among workers. Finally, Mahatma Gandhi viewed trade unions through the lens of trusteeship and class collaboration. He believed that employers are trustees of workers' interests, and that cooperation between classes can lead to a more just and harmonious society. By exploring these different theories, we see how trade unions are viewed not just as bargaining agents, but as powerful social institutions that can shape economic and social changes in various ways, aligning with the broader theme of social justice and workers' rights. Now, let's look at some of the main types of trade union structures. First, we have the craft union. This type of union is made up of workers who share the same craft or skill, like welders or carpenters. The idea here is to unite workers with similar expertise to negotiate better conditions for their specific trade. Next, there's the industrial union. Unlike craft unions, these include all workers within a particular industry, regardless of their specific skills. For example, a textile workers union would bring together everyone working in textiles, from machine operators to factory managers. The goal is to strengthen bargaining power across the entire industry. Then, we have the general union. These are broader and include workers from various industries and different types of work. It's a more inclusive approach, aiming to represent workers with diverse skills and backgrounds under one umbrella. Finally, it's important to understand the difference between blue-collar and white-collar workers. Blue-collar workers are typically manual laborers, such as factory workers or construction workers. White-collar workers are usually professionals or clerical staff, like office employees or managers. Recognizing these distinctions helps us understand the different needs and union strategies for various groups of workers. Connecting all these points to our overall theme, understanding these structures helps us see how workers organize to protect their interests in different contexts and industries. Now, let's take a closer look at the evolution of trade unions and the key provisions introduced by the Trade Unions Act of 1926. First, regarding registration, it's quite accessible. If a group has at least 7 members, they can apply to register as a trade union. This helped encourage the formation of unions across different sectors. Moving on to the minimum strength requirement, a trade union must have at least 10% of its workforce or 100 workers as members, whichever is less. This ensures that unions have a significant base before they gain legal recognition. Another important aspect is the political fund. Under Section 16 of the Act, unions can have a separate fund dedicated to political activities, but contributions to this fund are voluntary. This respects members' choices and maintains transparency. Regarding immunity, Section 18 provides civil immunity from conspiracy charges for trade unions engaged in legitimate activities. This legal protection is vital because it allows unions to operate and advocate without fear of unjust legal action. Finally, on age limits, a person can become a member of a trade union at 15 years old, but to hold an office-bearer position, they need to be at least 18. This ensures that leadership roles are held by individuals with a certain level of maturity. Overall, these provisions of the 1926 Act laid a strong foundation for protecting trade union rights and regulating their activities, aligning with the broader theme of workers' rights and organized labor. Let's take a closer look at some of the problems faced by trade unions in India. One major issue is the multiplicity of unions. When there are many unions within a single plant, it often leads to inter-union rivalry, which can weaken their collective bargaining power. Another challenge is outside leadership. Sometimes, political leaders end up heading these unions instead of the workers themselves, which can shift the focus away from workers' genuine needs and priorities. Then, we have intra-union rivalry, which refers to conflicts within the same union. This internal discord can hamper unity and make it harder for unions to effectively represent their members. Lastly, weak financials pose a significant problem. Many unions struggle with low membership fees and irregular payments, which limits their resources and ability to operate effectively. All these issues highlight how internal divisions and financial instability can undermine the strength and effectiveness of trade unions in India, impacting their overall role in improving workers' conditions. So, when we look at industrial relations, or IR, it really revolves around the conflict and cooperation between three key players: labor, management, and government. Different approaches interpret this dynamic in unique ways. Starting with the unitary approach, it sees everyone as sharing mutual interests. Conflicts, in this view, are often considered unnecessary or caused by agitators who stir trouble. The idea is that, fundamentally, all parties want the same thing: success and harmony. Then we have the pluralist perspective, which accepts that conflict is natural and inevitable. In this approach, trade unions are recognized as legitimate representatives of workers, acknowledging that diverse interests will sometimes clash. This perspective sees conflict not as something to be eradicated, but as a normal part of industrial relations. Moving on, the Marxist approach attributes conflict to the very structure of capitalism itself. It views the ongoing class struggle as the root cause of disputes between workers and owners. This perspective emphasizes that the capitalist system inherently produces conflict because of the unequal distribution of power and resources. Lastly, the system's approach, developed by Dunlop, offers a broader view. It sees IR as a web of interactions among three main actors: labor, management, and government, operating within a set of rules and norms. These rules shape how conflicts are managed or resolved, and the system's stability depends on how well these actors interact within that framework. So overall, these approaches help us understand the complex and layered nature of industrial relations, highlighting that conflict and cooperation are intertwined in different ways, depending on the perspective we take. Let's take a closer look at some key IR processes. First up is collective bargaining. This is essentially the negotiation process between employers and a group of employees, usually represented by unions. It's where both sides discuss wages, working conditions, and other important issues to reach an agreement that benefits everyone. Next, we have workers' participation in management, or WPM. This involves different levels of employee involvement, ranging from being simply informed about management decisions to actually participating in decision-making. The levels include informative, consultative, associative, administrative, and decisive, with each step giving employees a greater voice in how the company is run. Finally, let's talk about grievance handling. This is the formal process employees use to raise concerns or complaints related to their employment contract. Typically, this process follows a structured grievance redressal procedure, often involving 3 or 4 steps. It's designed to ensure that employee issues are addressed fairly and systematically, helping maintain a healthy work environment. Together, these processes form the backbone of effective industrial relations, fostering communication, participation, and resolution between employers and employees. Now, let's move on to Unit VI, which focuses on industrial disputes. This is a crucial part of understanding how labor relations are managed within industries. Industrial disputes typically arise when there's a disagreement between employers and employees over issues like wages, working conditions, or employment terms. Addressing these disputes effectively is key to maintaining industrial peace and productivity. Throughout this section, we'll explore the causes of disputes, methods of resolution, and the role of government and labor organizations in mediating conflicts. Understanding these dynamics helps us see how a balanced approach can prevent conflicts from escalating and ensure smooth industrial operations. So, as we discuss this unit, keep in mind how these disputes impact the broader economic and social environment. Let's delve into industrial disputes, which are essentially disagreements that can occur between employers and employees, or even among employees themselves. These disputes can stem from various factors and take different forms, so it's important to understand what drives them and how they manifest. First, the causes or factors behind these disputes can be broadly categorized into economic, managerial, and political reasons. Economic factors include issues like wages and bonuses, things that directly impact employees' earnings. Managerial factors involve personnel policies, layoffs, or retrenchments, which can cause friction if employees feel unfairly treated. Political factors relate to affiliations with political parties, which can influence workplace dynamics and disputes. Next, the forms of these disputes can be organized or unorganized. Organized forms are more structured, such as strikes, garrow, demonstrations, boycotts, and picketing. These are often planned and have a clear objective. Unorganized forms, on the other hand, tend to be more informal, like high absenteeism, low productivity, or tactics like go-slow, where workers intentionally reduce their work pace to protest or express dissatisfaction. Now, if we look at the trends in India, there's a noticeable shift happening. Previously, most disputes were about interest, demanding new benefits or improvements. But now, there's a growing focus on rights disputes, which are about protecting existing rights that workers believe are being violated. Additionally, we're seeing an interesting trend where the number of lockouts, where management temporarily closes the workplace, has started to surpass the number of strikes. This indicates a shift in power dynamics between management and labor, reflecting changing strategies and bargaining positions. Understanding these aspects is crucial because it helps us see how industrial disputes can be prevented or resolved, contributing to a more harmonious industrial environment. Let's delve into industrial disputes, which essentially refer to disagreements between different parties in the workplace. According to the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947, these disputes can occur between employers and employers, employers and workmen, or even among workmen themselves. These conflicts often lead to various forms of industrial actions, which are measures taken by employees or employers to express their grievances or to pressure the other side. Now, moving on to the different types of industrial actions, starting with strikes. A strike happens when employees stop work, usually to pressurize the employer into accepting their demands. It's a powerful tool for workers to voice their concerns. On the other hand, employers may resort to a lockout, which involves closing the workplace to put pressure on the employees, often when negotiations break down. There's also picketing, where workers stand outside the workplace, typically at the gate to prevent others from entering or leaving. This is meant to show solidarity and exert pressure. An action called garrow involves physically surrounding managers or officials, which is generally illegal or unconstitutional, but has been used in some instances to protest or demand action. Lastly, there's the boycott, where employees ask the public or other entities not to buy products from the employer or to avoid dealing with them altogether. Each of these actions reflects different strategies used by parties to address disagreements, and understanding them helps us see how industrial relations are managed and sometimes complicated by these conflicts. Let's take a closer look at the settlement machinery within a hierarchical framework. First, we have conciliation, where a neutral third party, known as a conciliation officer, steps in to help both sides reach a voluntary agreement. It's a collaborative process aimed at finding common ground. Next is mediation, which is quite similar, but the key difference is that the mediator takes a more active role by suggesting possible solutions. This approach can often help parties move past impasses more effectively. Then we have arbitration. Here, both parties agree to refer their dispute to an independent person, called an arbitrator. The important point is that the arbitrator's decision is binding, meaning both sides must accept it, making this a more definitive resolution. Finally, there's adjudication, which is a legal process. This involves mandatory settlement through labor courts, industrial tribunals, or national tribunals. These legal bodies have the authority to make binding decisions when other methods haven't resolved the dispute. Together, these mechanisms form a hierarchy that provides multiple avenues for resolving workplace disputes, from voluntary agreements to legally binding decisions, helping ensure order and fairness in industrial relations. Let's take a closer look at the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947, which is arguably the most important law related to settlement of disputes. This act sets up a multi-tier machinery designed to resolve conflicts systematically and effectively. Starting with preventive measures, under Section 3, we have the Works Committee. This is an internal mechanism where both labor and management have equal representation, aiming to address issues before they escalate into disputes. Moving on to conciliation, Sections 4 and 5 involve conciliation officers and conciliation boards. Here, a third-party mediator, usually from the government, steps in to help both sides reach an agreement. It's a more neutral, facilitative process. If disputes require fact-finding, then the Court of Inquiry under Section 6 comes into play. It investigates and gathers facts, but doesn't settle the dispute directly. Its role is to provide clarity and insight. When resolution through negotiation isn't possible, adjudication bodies are involved. The Labor Court, under Section 7, handles more legally complex matters, especially those listed under the second schedule. For cases requiring a more specialized legal approach, the Industrial Tribunal, Section 7A, is used. It also deals with legal issues, but covers cases from the second and third schedules. Finally, for disputes of national importance or those spanning multiple states, the National Tribunal, Section 7B, is the highest adjudicating body. It ensures consistency and authority across larger geographic or industrial sectors. Overall, this multi-tier system ensures that disputes are addressed at various levels, from internal committees to national tribunals, making the process comprehensive and structured. Now let's talk about strikes and lockouts. The Act makes a clear distinction between what's considered a legal work stoppage and what's illegal. A strike, defined under Section 2Q, is essentially when a group of workers refuses to work. It's a collective decision to halt work, often to press for certain demands or protest conditions. On the other hand, a lockout, as per Section 2L, is when an employer closes down their workplace, usually to put pressure on workers or as a response to disputes. One critical point to remember is the key prohibition in public utility services, like water, power, and railways. According to Section 22, workers in these sectors must give a 14-day notice before they go on strike. This requirement helps ensure that the public isn't suddenly affected by a work stoppage and that there's time for negotiations. Now, it's important to understand what makes a strike or lockout illegal. Any strike or lockout that occurs during the pendency of conciliation or adjudication proceedings is considered illegal. Basically, if there's an ongoing dispute resolution process, taking such actions can violate the law. Connecting this to the overall theme, it's about balancing the rights of workers and employers while maintaining public interest and order. Knowing what's legal and illegal helps everyone act within the boundaries of the law and supports fair dispute resolution. Now let's move on to the fourth key piece of legislation, the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act, 1946. This act was introduced to replace the vague, unwritten employment terms that many workplaces had with clear, written rules. The goal was to bring transparency and consistency to employment conditions, making sure both employers and workers understand their rights and responsibilities. Let's look at some of the main features. First, applicability. The Act applies mainly to establishments with 100 or more workmen, although in some states, this threshold is lowered to 50. This means it targets larger workplaces, where formal rules are especially important. Next, the core concept. Employers are required to define their standing orders or service rules in writing, and these must be certified by a designated authority, usually the labor commissioner. This certification process ensures the rules are fair and legally sound. What matters do these rules cover? They include classifications of workers, such as permanent, badly, and probationers, along with attendance, leave policies, rules for termination, and misconduct. All these details are standardized within the standing orders, providing clarity for everyone involved. Regarding certification, the employer must submit 5 copies of the draft rules to the certifying officer, who reviews and certifies them. This step formalizes the rules and makes them legally binding. Finally, there's a provision for suspended workers under Section 10A if a suspended worker's case is delayed due to reasons not attributable to them. They are entitled to a subsistence allowance, 50% of their pay for the first 90 days, and 75% thereafter. This ensures some financial support during periods of suspension, emphasizing fairness and protection. Overall, this act helps create standardized employment conditions, making workplace rules transparent and fair, an important step towards better industrial relations. Let's take a closer look at labor administration in India, focusing on the distinction between the state and central levels. India operates a concurrent system for labor matters, which means both levels have some authority, as outlined in List III of the 7th Schedule. At the central level, labor administration is primarily managed by the Ministry of Labor and Employment. The key figure here is the Chief Labor Commissioner, Central, who oversees the central sphere. This includes sectors like mines, railways, ports, and banks. On the other hand, each state has its own labor department or labor commissioner. They handle disputes and labor issues in most industries, such as textiles, sugar, and general manufacturing. This decentralized approach helps address regional differences effectively. Now, an important aspect of India's labor system is the role of tripartite bodies. The Indian Labour Conference and the Standing Labour Committee serve as platforms for dialogue and coordination between the center, state governments, and social partners like employers and workers. I also want to draw your attention to the 2nd and 3rd schedules of the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947, which are crucial for understanding jurisdiction. The 2nd schedule deals with matters within the jurisdiction of labor courts, things like dismissal cases and the legality of strikes. Meanwhile, the 3rd schedule covers issues within the scope of industrial tribunals, such as wages, hours of work, and rationalization measures. These schedules help define which issues fall under which tribunal, ensuring a clear legal framework for resolving disputes. So, in summary, the labor administration system in India is a blend of centralized and decentralized efforts, with important coordination mechanisms and legal schedules that streamline dispute resolution. This structure plays a vital role in maintaining industrial peace and worker rights across the country. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. I really appreciate your engagement and interest in what we've discussed. Remember, the key points we've covered, whether it's the strategies, insights, or practical applications, are all aimed at helping you achieve your goals more effectively. I hope this presentation has provided you with valuable perspectives that you can take away and implement. Again, thank you for being such a wonderful audience. I look forward to seeing how you apply these ideas moving forward.